Today's Tradecraft Tuesday. Today is the day where if we were all hanging out at InfoSec University, you would be filing into, let's say like Max and I are roommates, and you'd be hanging out, you'd pull out the beanbag, you'd sit down and you'd be like, Max, Matt, what's going on in the world of cyber? And we'd all have a nice chill chat about it. So welcome to Tradecraft Tuesday. My name is Matt Kiely. And today, Huntress presents RATS, remote management software from the hacker's perspective. We're going to be talking about RMM rat abuse. We've got a little tech demo for you. It should be a pretty good time. Now, my name is Matt Kiely, and 3, 2, 1, whoop, transition. I'm your friendly neighborhood hacker man, former red teamer, and ethical hacker, penetration tester. And I'm joined by the guy that hackers talk about him in hushed tones on the corner. He's a great guy to have on your team. He's a great mentor to me and the rest of the SOC here at Huntress. Max, why don't you introduce yourself, man?
Yeah, Max Rogers, leader of the operations center here. Thanks for letting me join you, Matt. Really appreciate it. I saw last minute what you were talking about, and I just had to get in on this. So thank you for
Nice.
letting me join.
So again, if you've got, this is very informal. In fact, I should ask you right now, if you can see Max in the upper right-hand corner, and you can also see him up top above the Zoom link, please let us know. And we're trying some new stuff out with the production
Yeah.
value here today.
How
So
many
just
Maxes are on the screen?
how many
That'll help us a
Maxes?
lot.
Do we have maximum Maxes? Do we have 1 Max, 2 Max, 3 Max? What do we got? But in any case, yeah, just go ahead,
Cool. We're
throw
good.
questions in chat. Are we good? No, nice.
Yeah,
Awesome.
one Max.
Well, let's talk about what we're talking about today. Let's talk about the thing we'll talk about. We're talking about RMMs and RATs. That's remote monitoring and management software and remote access tools. All right, remote access tools. That's what that acronym stands for sure. A little bit later in the presentation, we'll talk about a case study in which we saw what I would say shocking and really kind of wacky RMM and rat abuse, a full attack chain for rat attack. And then I've got a little lab demo for you, and we're going to learn via AnyDesk how to persist as part of kind of like an emulated attack chain. We're going to break out Sliver. We're going to break out, some command and control, and then we got time for Q&A. Hopefully, it should be a good time. And so to lead things off here, this is from, and let me get myself out of the way so you can see this fully. This is from the recently released SMB threat report. And Tradecraft Tuesday, there are no pitches during Tradecraft Tuesday, but I will say this is free. All you got to do is put your email in to sign up, and you can read all of the awesome, funky, crazy, shady tradecraft that we've seen happening to small and medium businesses. But one of the big findings here is that from our analyzed incidents, RMM software attacks have been prevalent and damaging. And so we see this a lot in small to medium businesses that have MSP IT providers that don't want to like remote into every single endpoint in all of their clients. And so what is a good way to solve this kind of scaled administration problem? Well, find yourself an RMM software. And so we're going to talk a little bit about some of the, I don't know, what would you call them? Attributes maybe of RMMs and RATs. And again, that's remote administration tool or access tool. And we'll talk a little bit first, just a primer about what these technologies are and kind of what they do. Now, in general, I would say, and it of course varies case to case and provider by provider and framework by framework, but they enable remote access and management of systems, right? So this is like, think your IT administrator can remote into an endpoint and run some kind of script on it and then make some configuration change. And they can do that at scale. So there's like a one-to-many relationship in how you can administer these systems. Really good for when you need to push out a bunch of changes to a bunch of different endpoints. Now, one of the interesting things here is that RMMs usually operate discreetly because you don't really want to disturb the end user when you're using these things. This is, one such example that you kind of want to work in the shadows and you don't want to be like right there in front of the user performing all of this stuff. So most of the time, your RMMs are going to operate discreetly. And one of the big attributes of RMM and RAT software here is that they have the ability to run tasks and execute scripts on the remote system. And like we mentioned before, we can do this at scale, which is very, very cool. And of course, these things are going to be designed with the ease of operation in mind. And one of the best things about this is that you can monitor your users and you can see what they are up to. So all of these are attributes of what I would say are the average run-of-the-mill remote monitor and management software or remote administration tool. So do we have... Oh, wait, hold on one second. Primer on command and control. Oh, this is so embarrassing. I have another presentation that I'm doing about command and control later this week. I'm sorry, this is not supposed to be in this presentation. You know what though? Why not? Why not go over some of the more knowledge in this field is never a bad thing. I think we can talk maybe a little bit about some of the attributes of command and control. We got some time to do that. So in general, I would say that command and control frameworks allow hackers to access and manage remote systems. So your hacker, in this case, is going to infect a remote system with one of their C2 agents, and then that allows you to access and manage that system as a hacker. Now, of course, one of the interesting things here is that this allows you to do this at scale. So this is like one hacker, one operator of the C2, and there's a many-to-one relationship here with how you can interact with these systems. And then another very interesting thing here is that these tend to be discrete, and they operate discreetly as not to disturb the end user, and they also can usually task and script execute on remote systems, and they're designed with, primary enable remote access systems designed with ease and operate, enable remote access. Hey, Max, I think these are the same thing.
Yeah, we might be given the same presentation.
Yeah, we're given the
Likely.
same presentation here. Yeah, this is bad. This is embarrassing. Yeah, I think remote monitoring and management and rats and command and control are basically exactly the same thing.
They are very much the same. You know, what's
Oh
crazy to
dear.
me is, historically speaking, I'm shocked it took this long for RMMs and rats to become so prevalently used in the wild. The prevalence of these tools really started to pick up in the last 4 or 5 years.
Mm.
And I think a lot of it is, you know, especially coming to Huntress in the MSP space in particular, RMM tool adoption has picked up. I mean, people aren't just using PowerShell scripts and kind of doing things on the back end. They're like, okay, I want a tool to make my life easier. And they're just becoming way more commonplace. There's more on the market. And we're seeing a lot of overlap. So yeah, please do dive into this a little bit.
Well, then I guess we could say that key insight here is that in the wrong hands, your RMMs and rats become command and control. Back in my red team days, there was the concept of the tier 0 asset, right? And that is the crown jewels. They are the leverage points that if you can access them, you open up the field of play. And so some of these things include like domain controllers is like a big one, but Active Directory certificate servers, that's another big one. RMMs and rats in this case should really be treated like they are command and control frameworks. And that if an adversary gets the keys to your RMM and rat software, they have the ability to do basically the same thing that they can do with a distributed command and control framework. This is basically like allowing a hacker to have a C2 agent on every endpoint, or at least all the endpoints that you have in your environment. So one of the principal issues here, though, is that the central thesis of why this can be difficult to pick up on and detect is that these are legitimate software frameworks that we use in this space. And so I used to like to say the best vulnerabilities are the things that people don't patch because they're features, not bugs, right? And so like Kerberoasting is an example of something that kind of, you can't really mitigate it in a lot of ways because it just kind of is a symptom of the operating system at play. And so this is one such example of what we're dealing with here. Max, this is a couple of selections from a time that Huntress tried to warn a particular partner that an RMM or a rat was in use maliciously. We had the smoking gun. We had enough proof to say that this was actually going down. And they kept rejecting the incident report, saying, no, this is nominal. This is totally fine. Do you want to speak a little bit about maybe, because you were in the room when this happened. So
Definitely. I feel like this was pulled from a different presentation where I'm actually not sure if it's one client, but I think at least a couple of these are from one client, one partner environment. It's super common, right? Like everyone's kind of burnt out on noise and alerts, and you know what's familiar in your environment, you know what's normal and allowed. And the number of times, I mean, this is weekly. We report on Rogue Screen Connect, and it's not just Screen Connect, it's any other RMM that exists. People are using it maliciously, but they're also using it legitimately. And so when we report these things, the gut reaction by a lot of IT admins or techs who are out in the field, or even senior principal folks on the ground is, oh yeah, we use Screen Connect. We use it everywhere. It's totally normal. They don't even read the details of the report. And if we didn't have people in the loop here at Huntress, this would actually catch a lot of people off guard. Like I've seen hospitals ransomed because they ignore alerts, right? They just keep firing and they think it's normal. This is the exact same scenario where any decent admin looking at this would be like, yeah, we use Screen Connect and they move on. We have to follow up and be like, no, no, no. We're very sure that this is related to pre-ransomware or a threat actor, and let's explain why, because we have some of the technical details. We've seen this exact Screen Connect instance or this other RMM instance used maliciously at other customer environments. We know what's coming. So we do have to do a little bit of legwork to convince partners and customers sometimes that what we're seeing is as bad as it actually is, which is
Yes.
scary. It's scary.
Metaphorical representation on screen at this point.
Yeah.
So I want to talk because, excuse me. So Max is at the head of the SOC. He administers, mentors, and develops the SOC capabilities. So you are the fearless leader of the personnel, and you've also, I mean, Max was in. He's been in the game so long that he was back in Mandiant when Mandiant was FireEye, right? So he's been around. So you've seen this probably time and time again. You've mentored and you've led our SOC analysts who see this kind of stuff. And I want to talk in a general sense, outside of the context of like what we do at Huntress, but in a general sense, what are the best? And I have the attack answer for this, and we're going to see the persistence and the attack side of the house here in a moment in the demo. But from the defense detection and deterrence and mitigation standpoint, what are we looking for here? Host indicators, network indicators, pattern of life, any combination of these. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, for sure. So I will start with kind of two different hats, right? So we are in a unique perspective of being a managed provider for thousands and thousands of environments, right? Tens of thousands of unique businesses. And so we have a very unique view into what is normal and what is not normal. And that is something that, like, if you're working at an internal SOC or you're the internal security analyst at a singular environment or a smaller environment, even, it's kind of difficult to see. And then the other hat is, okay, I'm in the SOC, I'm at this one business or responsible for a few businesses, and how can I tell what's going on? Historically, it's not just RMMs, but historically, my method and how we approach things is, an attacker is going to do attacker things once they access a system, whether it's from a backdoor or it's from an RMM solution or a rat. And so what we're looking for is a lot of the lateral movement type stuff, the domain enumeration, and we see a lot of that. But talking specifically around RMMs and remote access tools, even things like, where is this, Screen Connect instance calling out to? We'll use that because it was the last example. This Connect instance usually calls out to a domain name associated with the customer who's actually buying that software. And so when we see Rogue Screen Connect show up, a lot of times it is calling out to either one of the free trial domains. Like if you just spin up a Screen Connect or an Atera or whoever's offering a free trial on their RMM or RAT, you can kind of tell that this is a free trial version versus the normal version. And so that's kind of on the network side, but on the endpoint, you can also pull that config and see that too. Something else that's kind of a dead giveaway, where is it being installed on the system and how is it being installed? So was it being installed in the user's applications directories with all the other normal applications, or is this being installed out of a temp directory? That is inherently way more suspicious for us.
Hint, hint, a little spoiler for later in the presentation. Awesome.
Yeah, right. So if you see, an RMM tool being deployed out of your musics folder, like that's a little different than expecting it in your, normal applications folder. So there are some dead giveaways like that. Luckily for us, we even have that feedback loop of having, tens of thousands of companies that we're monitoring. So once we find a malicious trait of a specific tool being used, we can kind of track that threat actor across different environments too. So like once we know that this domain is being used maliciously, boom, we can add that as an indicator, check everywhere else, and we kind of get that feedback loop. So you see a couple different ways there. And a lot of times how we find the new ones is simply looking backwards, right? Once an attacker gets in and starts moving around, we'll look at, okay, how did this get here? What downloaded it? The other dead giveaway, we can move on after this one, but it's a really great one. How is it being installed? So not just where is it being installed, but how, right? Was it installed after a download from some sketchy thing that was downloaded from some other sketchy website? Is it being installed silently? And then something we look at a lot in
Intent.
that case about where it's being installed is um, just how many hosts is it on, right? Like, are we using Screen Connect and now a Terra has showed up? Like that is kind of a dead giveaway of
Yeah.
not normal activity. It kind of gets our eyes lit up a little bit.
Yeah, maybe one of the quintessential questions here to ask is like what RMMs and rats are we likely to see in the environment, because that's kind of the standard rollout for our different clients. And then maybe start to connect the logs and baseline that as the usage in your environment. And then when you see something with a low percentile, whoa, that's kind of out of the ordinary. And then maybe use that as a springboard. As always, the human brains, those awesome human brains in the loop here is one of the most powerful things that you can apply. No other tool that we currently have comes close to that. Well, let's move on. We've got a little bit of just like a picture board story to tell here with one of the most, I would say, shocking and also wackiest examples of RMM and rat abuse in the wild. We wrote a blog about this, and I'm going to have to actually get my show notes up because it's like a Benny Hill theme kind of chase around a hallway here. Like the amount of detail and how this actually goes down gets insane. But read the blog. It's called Bitter Pill, third-party pharmaceutical vendor linked to pharmacy attack. And here it is. Or that's the long form title. But yeah, definitely read this blog. We should post that in chat if we have not already. But let's talk about the key players here. What you end up with are two Windows Server 19 hosts. And they are on essentially different sides of the world, organizationally speaking, maybe even geographically. I'm not sure. Different IPs, different organizations, different people behind the helm here. These are distinct, different servers, and they belong to distinct, different organizations. And we found an instance of some evil, the source of which is, somewhere out there, but the destination of which is the first Windows server in our attack chain. This is for a pharmaceutical organization, and we have an instance of Screen Connect, which we will call instance A, and the user that is using this Screen Connect instance is redacted1, right? So you can imagine that's just, a.user at whatever. What ends up happening is that after a little bit of enumeration and looking around and some time spent on the endpoint, after this first instance A Screen Connect, we have a second Screen Connect installer downloaded, executed, and a second Screen Connect instance is opened up on this same server. This is now Screen Connect instance B in the same organization, same Windows server, this pharmaceutical organization, but we've got a different user in this case. So Screen Connect A grabs a new Screen Connect installer, installs it on the endpoint. Screen Connect B connects in with a different user. All right, so these are two distinct users at this point. Lo and behold, we see, and this kind of goes back to what Max was talking about, this kind of like, check the parents and check the children of your processes. We see PowerShell commands running from Screen Connect instance B. And an additional a.msi file by this PowerShell command is downloaded into the documents section.
Yeah, quick note right there. If you want to get started in threat hunting and, maybe you're not super experienced or just kind of want a good fun time over the weekend, just go look in your environment to see if you can find single character executable files, like a.msi, a.exe, 1.exe. You start there, you will find some interesting things if you have enough hosts. So it's a dead giveaway that probably something not legitimate going on here.
Yeah, the foo.msi bar.exe. So I just moved my camera out of the way so everybody can see clearly, but we've got a PowerShell command. This is basically a very simple PowerShell download cradle, and that's pulling a.msi out of this random IP address and bringing it into the documents folder, right? Nice and easy, writable, clean place to drop something that you want to install. And boom, looking for this, lo and behold, get Max out of the way there to show the KEKW meme in the corner. Lo and behold, boom, we've got Screen Connect instance C. I do not remember if this was the same or a different user in this case. It's actually not super pertinent to the rest of the attack chain. But All right, let's recap. We've got three, count them, three Screen Connect instances going to the same Windows Server 2019 host. And like this is the point where the saxophone starts playing, and this starts to become kind of hilarious. It's not hilarious that a cyber attack happened. I want to make that very clear. But if you're gonna have fun with this stuff, I mean, you know, you gotta laugh, or else you cry. So following the download and execution of Screen Connect Instance C, we have yet another PowerShell cradle. And this time we set up another very simple kind of download PowerShell cradle here to grab test.xml from this remote endpoint. I also love that it's HTTP, plain text, but then uses port 443 as the actual port for the socket. So congratulations, guys. You fooled us there because we were looking for HTTPS and you clearly circumvented our detection there. But in any case, actually, Max, I'll ask you, when you see something like test.xml written into the environment, what are you like, where do you go first? I have an answer to this because I've done this about 1,000 times, but what is your immediate thought when you see something like an XML file?
Well, I mean, for me, first thing I want to comment on is the whole HTTP thing. That might sound really silly, but years of, especially when network sensors were a lot more popular before we had EDR, a lot of network sensors simply did not look at traffic over 443 because most of it was encrypted and it was a massive processing load to just look at traffic that you couldn't see anyway. So for a long time there, doing something as simple as like switching to port 443, even though it's all plain text, would work perfectly fine.
Hey, fair point.
So, the weird things, I don't think the attackers are really thinking at that level a lot of
Yeah.
times. I think a lot of times it's just simplicity of getting your server up, but it did work. For me, a lot of times, honestly, it's just like, can I acquire this file? Can I see is it a config for something? Is it setting something up? Can I get some details about what the attacker is trying to do around here? I mean, attackers like things simple as well. They're doing a lot of things from command line. They don't want to be in a bunch of directories, configuring things once they start. They kind of have a playbook. And so, there's usually one or two config files. Maybe there's a downloader, and you can kind of get the full story of what this attacker is doing right out the gate, simply looking at this stuff. But yeah, what are you thinking?
So check this out. Next thing you see, and remember again for the kind of like tradecraft threat hunting detection and deterrence here, this is all coming out of the Screen Connect instances. That executable, the child arguments and processes coming out of that look like PowerShell running a download cradle for this XML file. And then we'll see something like the ms build command, right? And so if we put two and two together, this is something that I used to do a lot, is an ms build file. If you did not know this, you can specify in XML a set of C# usually is how I used to do it, that you can pass to the .NET Framework ms build binary. And what this does is it reads in some headers and then looks at, you can write the code in the body of the XML, and it looks ugly as heck, but you can structure the code in the body to do some kind of nefarious activity. And when you pass it over to ms build then executes this code. And this is a classic living off the land binary attack, because ms build, if the .NET Framework is installed on the endpoint, most of the time it is, sometimes it's not, the ms build binary is going to be there waiting and ready, and all you have to do is pass it this XML file with some code inside. It will compile and execute it there for you.
And I know where you're kind of trying to take it, right, is there are a lot of security appliances on the market. There's a lot of tools out there. There's a lot of prevention going on. Techniques like this allow the attacker to get their malware, get their evil files onto disk and run without having to worry about, hey, just packaging up an exe file and then trying to get someone to download it, right? Chrome could stop it. You might have AV that's kind of looking at some of these common things. These are just methods and tools for the attacker to have an easier time getting their malware to actually get on the system and running without having to get their files nuked and in some quarantine that they have to deal with.
Unfortunately, that was not the case, because this ms build file tried to do a thread injection of Meterpreter. This is like a very naive kind of process injector. I don't remember if it was a remote process or if it was its own process, but it basically opened up a handle to either itself or a remote process. It allocated a section of memory as read-write executable. It wrote some shell code or something, and boom, we tried to get a Meterpreter session. I believe if you read the blog post, it said the first time they tried to do this, it failed, but then it succeeded subsequently. But yes, this is basically a way to live off the land and try to get your Meterpreter session running on the endpoint. So interesting combination here of Screen Connect, rat abuse, and also leading into I'm careful to not call Metasploit a true C2. I think there's a very big distinction there, but get like a second stage exploitation payload running. So Meterpreter, of course, is just a nice fancy little shell handler that's built into the Metasploit framework. So let's recap for a moment here. We've got Screen Connect instance A from redacted user 1. We've got Screen Connect instance B, redacted user 2. We implicitly here have another Screen Connect that I'm not showing representing on here because the slide would have gotten way too busy. The most shocking development of this entire ordeal here is this next slide that I'm about to show you. Oh my goodness. So this is what clued us in, because before this part of the attack chain, this was all normal. Like this was like, okay, we've seen this before. This is a classic playbook. But this right here was what really tipped us off that maybe something else more nefarious was going on. And so I'm going to move my face out of the way just so everybody can see a little bit better. So we've got a second Windows Server 2019, the one that was on the other side of the world, remember? And it belongs to like a distinct medical organization. And we've got the instance of Screen Connect instance B with redacted user number 2 connecting to this random other organization on the other side of the world. And so we never got, I don't think we ever drew a definitive conclusion here, but we suspected there was some kind of upstream organization compromise, but we don't have anything to really like back that up or prove it. But what we saw here is a splitting attack chain and the same user identity used in 2 distinct organization Screen Connect RMM rat attacks.
Yeah,
that's pretty scary.
That's why I love the people who work here at Huntress, because, I wish I could say it was some super awesome automated system. Literally just our people on the ground, our researchers that we have, were able to put 2 and 2 together and understand, hey, we've seen similar tactics across multiple different unrelated customer environments. And so I think your next 2 slides kind of comment on this, but this is a great slide to have up while we talk about it. Robin just kind of mentioned it in the chat, supply chain exploit. Not quite like what you'd think of a normal supply chain, but very similar concept. So on that first computer up there with the Meterpreter, bang on it right there, we had a pharmacy get hit with an attack and some pre-ransomware type activity by the threat actor. And then we saw a hospital with an endpoint get very similar activity on it. And when we dug into that hospital, we realized that system is inside the pharmacy at that hospital. And so when we started pairing this stuff together, we get super sketched out anytime you have an industry link, right? They're both pharmaceutical, they're both pharmacies. It's healthcare, same TTPs. And what was really scary was, and this is the big kicker, the Screen Connect instance was not a typical cloud-hosted Screen Connect instance. It was actually a on-prem Screen Connect that was super out of date, hosted on the internet. And we didn't get to completely confirm with the upstream, but it was a pharmaceutical software vendor. So this pharmacy software vendor was using Screen Connect for their support. So if a pharmacist called in and was like, hey, I can't get the tool to work, or like I'm troubleshooting this bug and can you help me get it up and running? The support people for that pharmaceutical software company would Screen Connect in and grab some logs and help out. Well, some attacker got access to that Screen Connect instance and started using it to get access into pharmacies and hospitals around the country. And we don't know to what scale or how many, but our feeling is always, if we're seeing it at 2 pharmacies with the view that we have as Huntress, globally, that gets kind of scary. It gets really scary, actually. And so we actually did some outreach to the affected pharmaceutical company. We gave them all kinds of information, the tactics, the TTPs. I think they started remediating. We didn't work with them directly or anything like that, but really stands out when you see an upstream vendor being used in a supply chain attack kind of way to gain access to many. And it's very similar in the MSP space. Attackers like to go after an MSP because it's a one-to-many relationship, where if you can get the keys to that kingdom, you now have many, many victims that you have direct access to that you didn't have to go and fish or find external exploits. You can kind of just go. So it was a really scary one, especially with these being in hospitals.
For sure. And the best hacker tools are often not hacker tools at all. TLDR on Bitter Pill is that we've got remarkably, we just kind of mentioned this, we've got remarkably similar Tradecraft on both servers, but the most concerning part of this was that there might have been some kind of upstream identity compromise, right? And so, yeah, we've got like a perfect storm here. Combine some kind of upstream identity compromise with the fact that RMMs and rats are in use as legitimate software in the environment. You've got a recipe for really insidious, really tricky detection and response.
If you want to know real quick, the maybe the scariest part was, we have relationship with different people in different media outlets and different news venues and things like that. And we always keep them, hey, here's some of the interesting stuff that's going on. Most reporters did not find that interesting. They're like, yeah, that happens all the time. Like, we're kind of used to this now. Like, that's not really news. And we're like, dang,
The
that's
collective
where
sigh.
that's where we're at as an industry, is like,
Yeah.
multiple pharmacies and hospitals getting pre-ransomware activity from a vendor is like,
Yeah, tell me
okay.
something I don't know, kid. All right.
Yeah,
Well, we're still
exactly.
out there fighting the good fight, though. So yeah, for sure. Shout out to the SOC analyst keen eye that picked up on that. And yeah, so here is the part of the now I have not been monitoring the chat. I apologize, but to keep Max up on the screen here, I have to not have the chat like it's the Zoom client thing. It's crazy, but yeah, if you've got any questions or anything, please do use the Q&A or just throw it out into the chat itself. Otherwise, we're gonna move on to the lab demo here where I will demonstrate a little bit of what we've been talking about here. I don't have like a full RMM in my lab here. I don't want to mess with the licensing for Atera or anything like that, but I do have a couple of things to show you. So this is the situation. Let's say I'm going to bring you in on a hacker ride along here. So actually, no, we're going to keep this ethical. We're going to be a red team engagement ride along here. I'm not a cyber criminal. I'm an emulated cyber criminal. Big difference. So the scenario here is that I am an emulated cybercriminal who has fished their way onto the endpoint. Let's just assume initial access, or maybe this is some kind of assumed breach red team engagement scenario. But I've got my beacon, my sliver beacon, alive and kicking on the endpoint, but the clock's ticking here, right? And so I'm looking for a way to persist. And I have this brilliant idea because I've been reading a lot of threat intel about rat and RMM abuse that I'm going to say, hey, I know that my target environment uses AnyDesk. So why don't I install a new AnyDesk client, run a silent install on that, and then that will allow me to have persistent access into the environment. This is not my original idea. I want to point that out. What you can see in the corner there is Snow Crash, who is just an amazing red team security, offensive security researcher, tweeted this sometime in 2022. And so I'm going to show you basically the playbook, the beat by beat playbook of how Snow Crash explains this kind of persistence. But at the end of the day, what I'll be able to do is install AnyDesk on a new client and then run it with a silent install so it doesn't pop anything up. And then that will give me the ability, even in a natted environment, even with a firewall between, well, even with a router between me where I can't hit the IP address directly, I'll be able to go to AnyDesk and then bounce that connection into that environment. So it is demo time. And so let's throw standby up on screen. And, oh, the production value. I got to get my lab up and running and make sure that, yeah, see, my victim box shut down in the time that we've been presenting, and that's always something you got to check before
Yeah, and
you
while
go
you run
live
through
on
that real
this.
quick, so you mentioned the silent install. Everyone might not be completely familiar. Basically, when you install these things, a lot of times you get like a pop-up window, right? That makes it very obvious you're installing something. You gotta, especially if you're on Windows, maybe you need to like approve it because you're an admin. Silent installs, if you have the right permissions, allows you to completely behind the scenes get that software up and running. User never even notices anything that happened. So big help for attackers on that one.
Beautiful, beautiful little piece of tradecraft there. Now, I'm going to call out specifically, there are 2 times where I have to hide my screen during this presentation because otherwise you're going to see the password and the AnyDesk connection string. And if you have those 2 pieces of information, you'd be able to remote into my machine. And I ain't going down like that. All right. I know you all wouldn't do anything actually. All right, so if you're not familiar, what I'm looking at right now is called Sliver. It's one of my favorite C2s that are available. It's available open source. It's built by the amazing researchers over at Bishop Fox, and it's made to be an advanced multiplayer kind of command and control framework, right? So this is like this is one of the best, at least open source offerings that they have out there. If you're interested, if you've ever wanted to like start to learn adversary emulation and tradecraft emulation, I mean, Sliver is a really good tool to learn in this case. But what I've done is emulate this kind of assume breach scenario. So I've got Loud Strawberry here, which is my beacon on the endpoint. Got to pull up my show notes so I make sure I get this all correct. All this really demonstrates is that I've made a beacon. Basically, if you're unfamiliar with how C2s work, there's the listener, right? The listener is like a port that's open and ready to catch an incoming connection. And I make a beacon. And there's a lot of like, complicated stuff going on under the hood, but basically you drop that beacon onto your target and run it, and it allows you to have positive control over something in the target network where you wouldn't otherwise have access to that target network. So I think like phishing is the big one. If you make it in with some other kind of like web shell exploit, possibly you drop a C2 agent, but yeah, in any case, it wakes up every minute or two. It says, hey, do you have any tasks for me? And the C2 server will say, oh, no, you're good. Go back to sleep. Or if I want to run a shell command in the environment, it'll pass that information to the agent, execute that, return the results on my behalf. So let's go ahead and let's say that I just got my session in the environment. Time check. We're doing pretty good. If this is an emulated activity, I take off my red teamer hat for a moment and I put on my safety hat and I say, am I where I expect to be? Did somebody just open this in their home on their personal, PC? Do I have a beacon? Is the external IP address exactly what I expect it to be for this organization? And is that in scope? So very briefly, we're going to look around. We're going to survey the environment. And so I'm going to use this session here and I'm going to say, who am I? And so the way that Sliver executes who am I is different than if you're just executing a shell command of who am I. But in any case, I find that I am Husky, user Husky on this desktop. Now, let's assume we've also done a little bit more situational awareness gathering. We've looked at the host name. We've looked at the ARP table. We've looked at some of the DNS entries. We try to figure out where we are in the scope of this organization. But let's say that I've done all of that and I want to start to, because the clock is ticking, remember, we've got a beacon on the endpoint, but we're not going to have that forever. EDR is already starting to poke its eyes at us, so we've got to figure something out here. So let's go ahead and upload. On my desktop, right below Max here, I've got my beacon, but I also have the AnyDesk CMEXE, and this is the installer for AnyDesk. And so let's go ahead and upload this. So we will upload the anydesk-cm.exe file. And we're going to upload that into C users, Husky, app data, local. Max is like, I've seen this before. Temp.
Yeah, I think you got a typo in your app data, though.
Thank you.
Which is funny because I just tweeted yesterday, 2 days ago, about how
Yeah.
funny it is when attackers make typos.
Yep. Another thing to note here is that I used to red team with people from some 3-letter organizations. What I'm doing right now would get me like slapped upside the face. They'd be like, you never, ever live type on a system like this. You always do what's called pastables, which I have on my other monitor. I don't know why I'm not doing that. But you always do pastables. You take out the commands. You give your team the info about what commands you want to run. They give you 100 reasons why your command is not good. You should do it this way, etc. You hash it out. But when you finally have the command to run, you put it in a text document. You copy it and you paste it. You never ever live type, because if you make a mistake, like Max just said, that is, your operational context might not survive mistakes like that. So anyway. So let's go ahead and upload AnyDesk into C users Husky app data local temp anydesk.exe. We have written our file into the app data local temp directory. Next up, I'm going to actually just do the thing I just said, because why, we're not in like a dire situation here, but why make mistakes if you don't have to? What we're going to do is execute. So we're going to have the Sliver agent execute the following command. We are going to run this anydesk.exe executable. We're going to run it with the install argument. We're going to install that into app data local AnyDesk. This might be the legitimate place that AnyDesk usually gets installed. I'm not totally sure about that. But we're going to start it with Win. In other words, when Windows boots up, go ahead and start it up. That's the key to our persistence. And we're also going to do a silent install, like we just said. So let me glance over my command here and make sure I don't mess anything up on target. Husky app data local temp AnyDesk install. We're going to install that into local AnyDesk, and we're going to start with Win silence. All right, great. So that went ahead and executed, hopefully successfully. And so I can actually go back over onto my endpoint over here, and I'm going to check to make sure that that actually did that. And let's see, I'm going into, in fact, I could probably just pull this right over. And you usually like wouldn't have access to do this live on the endpoint, but you know, work with me here. We've got app data local, not roaming. Yep. And that is AnyDesk. Okay, beautiful. So we've got our AnyDesk client there and ready to go. And I want to say, where did we install that to? We installed that to app data local AnyDesk. Yep. Okay, we're great. Next thing that we probably want to do is to clean up for our operation. Let me boot this. That's the wrong one to boot out of the way. Let me boot this one out of the way. What we probably want to do at this point is to remove any evidence of the installation of AnyDesk in this case. So what we want to do is remove C users Husky app data local temp AnyDesk. We're removing the one that we brought onto the system in the first place. Sometimes you'll also see people or threat actors downloading it directly. Like if they have a PowerShell open, PowerShell instance open, they will grab it right from the AnyDesk website. In this case, I just uploaded it right from my Sliver beacon. Now comes the time, and I'm calling this out specifically so I don't mess up. Now comes the time where I want to hide the screen. So please stand by. I'm going to hide the screen, and I'm going to change the password for this AnyDesk install instance. Right now, I'm just going to over-explain and narrate what I'm doing. I'm dropping into a shell on the target, and actually, Sliver in this case says, "This action is bad. OPSEC, are you an adult?" And you have to say yes to that prompt, which is pretty funny. But they want to make sure, hey, like when you drop into the shell, you are going to be loud. All right. So anything you do at this point is coming out of cmd.exe or maybe PowerShell, depending on your context. Are you sure this is what you want to do? And you have to say yes in that case. And I'm just double checking that I am hidden, which I am. And I am now putting in the command to change the password for this AnyDesk instance. And it looks like it ran successfully. I am exiting out of my shell. Actually, let me check my show notes here. I am exiting out of my shell. And I am clearing the screen. And it actually takes a second because Sliver likes to kind of like, there's some like pipe data writing stuff that's going on under the hood here. So it just takes a second.
Quick call out for those who aren't following chat. We got a lot of good stuff in Q&A. We'll make sure to get to those either after the demo or right towards the end of the presentation. So keep them coming.
Next up, I'm running a command to enumerate the connection string out of my AnyDesk installed client that I just put on the endpoint. And so I'm going to need this because for my own AnyDesk client, I got to point it where to go. And with those two pieces of information, I can now, I just got to make sure I write this down. And this one, this piece of information is actually not as sensitive as long as you also don't have the password. And now I'm exiting out of my shell yet again. And effectively, once I've done that, we are done in Sliver. I can deliver myself into AnyDesk persistence, but after that point, I am good. And so we're bringing it back here. 3, 2, 1. Look at that. Nice and clean. Now the next part here, actually, I'm just gonna hide you one more time because I need to bring up the AnyDesk client, and I'd rather not show everybody the connection string for my own AnyDesk one. And so what I'm going to do is this, and now you can't see it. So next up, as long as I don't move this window around, you won't be able to see where I'm trying to connect into. And so our next step here is to use this is the legit AnyDesk client, right? And I just installed that over on my endpoint here. And so let's go ahead and try to connect in, and it's going to ask me for the password. And I have the password right here, and I'm going to copy that in. And if all has gone correct, ladies and gentlemen, hackers and gentle hackers, we got them. We are live on our AnyDesk endpoint. I can drag the window around here. We've got the cmd.exe running in the background. I've got antivirus disabled because this is a demo, and I've got to hedge all of my bets against the demo gods there. But this is it. This is our AnyDesk persistence. This is the kind of silent install that gets us a foothold into the environment. And so now I should be good to exit out of my, actually, I'll go sessions. And if, assuming I don't need this sliver shell anymore, this sliver beacon anymore, I can actually just sessions kill all. Kill. There we go. Dash kill all. Thank you. Thank you, sliver. We've killed off my sliver beacon because now all I need to persist is this AnyDesk client. And that is our lab demo for today.
Yeah, so while you have that pulled up, there's some obvious pros and cons of using a tool like an AnyDesk in this way versus something like a C2 framework like Sliver, right? So
Of course.
anytime an attacker is using a GUI-based, remote access tool where you can see the screen and you can move windows around just like you were sitting at the computer, it's blatantly obvious to whoever's sitting at that computer. So a lot of times you'll see this used a little bit more maybe when it's in a server environment, right? Like people aren't sitting there at the console seeing what this server does. Maybe their operations are more overnight, non-standard like business hour type activity. So yeah, it kind of makes it a little bit obvious. I will say though, I don't think I've ever had someone report, hey, my mouse is moving and I'm not moving it, and it actually be an attacker. So that is definitely still ringing true. But yeah, it kind of blows your cover a little bit. So it just kind of depends who's trying to do what versus a command line tool versus a GUI tool.
Yeah, for sure. Another consideration here, you could operate off hours too. Like I pulled some night shifts as a red teamer, where we would, because you can basically, like, I can lock the screen right now and I can still have AnyDesk access with that screen lock in place, and then I can sign in. Now, if the user is sitting at the desk, they're going to see all of that happen. But
Super
if it's
common in scams though, like
yeah,
maybe not ransomware per se, but a lot of financial fraud and scams, definitely screen locks.
For sure. Well, in any case, again, I apologize. I'm not really monitoring the chat right now, but I know Max is. So if we have any questions or comments or anything like that, please let us know.
Yeah, I'll tee up a couple real quick. We can go through some. So one is, how do attackers gain access to established RMM tools at organizations?
So this can be, I mean, these are your average or your kind of foundational attack in initial access mechanisms, right? So this is like social engineering, phishing, exploiting public facing applications, in rare instances, supply chain or upstream compromise, cloud cloud compromise that pivots into on-prem access, or maybe your RMM is hosted in the cloud. So that is those are all examples. I mean, in extreme cases, we've seen public exploitation against the RMM servers themselves, right? And so you can imagine a scenario in which users have installed an RMM server on-prem, but they have it port forwarded, or they have it available to the external internet. And if there is an exploit, like a remote code execution exploit against that RMM, I mean, that's a recipe for disaster in that case. But yeah, your primitives for actually initial access into the system are all basically the same no matter where you go. This is just a follow-on post-compromise activity that gets you RMM access after you've landed in there.
Yep. There's a second question here, kind of similar, but how can you properly secure a tool like TeamViewer or similar tools like this? And same way of like getting into these tools, MFA, like we've seen
MFA.
time and time again, at the scale we're at, all it takes is one account to not have MFA, like some old service account or some shared account from way back when that never got MFA enabled, and boom, brute forcing or password theft, whatever it is, account just didn't have MFA on it for some reason. So that applies across the board too. All right, one more real quick.
Yeah.
Uh, this one's more so in your camp. Does Huntress consider MTLS used by Sliver anomalous? I'm not familiar with what MTLS.
So MTLS is mutual TLS. So it is mutually authenticated TLS on both sides of the equation, right? So instead of kind of the asymmetric into a symmetric key flow that you have with normal HTTPS, MTLS is like there are certificates on both sides that have to agree that both are legitimate. It's a very high security protocol. It's used by a lot of well, I'm not gonna say what I just never mind. But Sliver is emulating a very imagine an organization that really wants to keep its communications under wraps.
Got it.
So this is Tradecraft Tuesday. I really need to stay away from the kind of like look at how cool our platform is. There is a time and a place for that discussion. But what I can answer is in a general sense, if you do not expect MTLS to be active in your environment. If you are a donut shop or a car shop or an administrative office and your IT administrators have never even heard of MTLS and you see MTLS in your environment on like the Suricata or the Zeek logs or the firewall logs or something like that, that may be cause for alarm. I cannot give you an enumerated list of all of the random IoT devices and things that may use MTLS, unfortunately. As an additional note, Sliver does not have to use MTLS. Sliver actually can use HTTP or HTTPS. The encrypted component of Sliver does not rely on TLS, so it encrypts with its own algorithm. The body of any request, whether you're using HTTP or HTTPS, is itself encrypted, and as it traverses back to the team server. But you don't have to use MTLS. You can use DNS with Sliver. You can use WireGuard, like really interesting, cool VPN protocols to establish C2. We got to do a Tradecraft Tuesday on just like the depths at which you can go when you have like really effective C2 tools. And a lot of these are open source and free. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, and attackers are using them to great effect. So here's another one. We got some time here. The two questions, very similar. Pretty much comes down to what does this look like in the process tree? Like, was Sliver the parent?
Yes. So let's start from so we've made a lot of assumptions in this kind of like a little demo demonstration. I literally had a program called beacon.exe that was double clicked and ran as an administrator. So in this case, beacon.exe is the parent, right, in the process tree. Sliver can be made into shared object files, also known as DLLs on Windows. You can make a Sliver DLL, and you can either sideload that in, or you can run DLL32. You can lol bins execute. So the top of the process tree is not necessarily consistent in the attack chains that look like this, right? It could come from a C2. It could come from a web shell. It could come from Excel, a macro that somebody opened and double clicked, right? Now, the second order down in the process tree is your AnyDesk, or really it's any number of enumeration and situational awareness commands. You might see who am I coming from the beacon. You might see net user. You might see netstat or looking at the ARP table or something. But eventually, when you see whatever your parent process was, maybe downloading and executing the AnyDesk installer, that's another kind of clue there. And then from there, after the installation of the AnyDesk persistence, the parent-child tree, the process tree, is severed from Sliver to AnyDesk. Meaning, once AnyDesk is installed in the environment, the process becomes AnyDesk as its like the parent process for all of that other activity is AnyDesk. And so just like explorer.exe is kind of the shell of interactive access, and you can see somebody opening up cmd.exe and then running something with Explorer as its parent, AnyDesk becomes the parent in that process chain. So the hunting efforts for this one really should focus on that, right? Unfortunately, I don't think you're going to get much out of a child process for AnyDesk when it's running in the environment. Like you don't run, I'm actually not sure if AnyDesk spawns cmd.exe, but it's really just a viewport of your desktop. So I don't think that's the case. I think it's really just AnyDesk is running at that point. So you're gonna want to catch this at the installation. I think would be probably the best area to focus in on.
Cool. Great answer. Another one right here. We can fix this one real quick. Just a common list of usual suspects. I'll drop right into chat GitHub repo of we don't endorse this, not ours. We can't promise what changes in here or what you're playing with, but it's pretty much just a list of various RMM and rat type tools that get used and abused a good bit. We'll drop that in chat. But the high level, kind of like the top hit list, right? Any of these tools that offer a free trial. So
Yeah.
there are a big subset of them that require you to give a credit card or talk to a salesperson or at least engage with the company in some way to
Yeah.
spin up an instance. And then there's the other ones which anybody can just go to their website, download the client, spin up a test instance and go. Those are the ones the attackers are abusing.
Facts, no printer. Facts, no printer.
Yep.
I take issue again. Metasploit is not a C2. Red teamers, pen testers, Metasploit is not a C2. It is an exploitation framework. It was not built to have secure communications. You can do better. There are other offerings here that have OPSEC and responsibility and security baked into their offerings. So and putting Merlin in D tier here is unforgivable. I was on so many engagements where Merlin carried me to victory that it's like it's obscene to put Merlin in D. Default Cobalt Strike and F I get, but
Damn, flamed. Okay. One of the questions here is how do you use an EDR to detect some of the initial access, like AnyDesk being installed? Again, it comes down to it's a large range of things. We don't try and limit it to one. Like detection is a spectrum, and you try to catch things as many places as you possibly can. How was it downloaded, right? Did it come from direct IP or did it come from AnyDesk's official installer? We might not respond to every one of those, but it's a contextual alert that we get. Was it installed into a temp directory, the musics folder, the users pictures folder? Like, where is it being installed to? And then there was another question we got asked, which is kind of similar. What are signs of RMM abuse? A lot of times we don't put all of our chips on detecting right when the attacker gets in. Almost definitely at some point, once the attacker is in, they're going to pull in additional tooling to do things like credential dumping,
yeah.
network enumeration. A
Oh,
lot of attacks are caught at the credential dumping stage.
in fact, this instance right here, so what within this, insane array of Screen Connect instances, one of the post-exploitation activities was to download a port scanner compiled binary. They downloaded like some kind of CVE priv-esque on Windows that was recent. So there was like that kind of stuff as well. And that's all just part and parcel of average attack chains. And so those can all be dead giveaways too. Why is massscan.exe running on this desktop? Why is the CVE 2023 whatever.exe running on this desktop? Like those can be smoking guns as well.
Yep, for sure. What privileges do RMM clients install with?
That's a good question. I bet it probably depends on it depends, the best answer. It probably depends on the technology, but like that AnyDesk instance was, I think, running with user in the context of the user. But I'm sure you install a lot of RMMs as a service, right? The agent is probably installed as a service, therefore it has system level privileges.
Yep.
That would be my guess. I don't have much to back that up right now, but yeah.
Yeah. So last one I'll take, or at time, but how often are we reacting to this at Huntress? This is a daily thing.
Yeah.
This is very much a daily thing.
And our sponsor for today's stream is Huntress, obviously. We've got to do this. No pitches during Tradecraft Tuesday, but the Neighborhood Watch program is free. And if you want to see what kind of stuff you might be able to find in your environments when, shady activities go down, you can sign up for free. And that is all I've got for you. I'm going to go ahead and say, Max, thank you so much for being my co-pilot for this one. Thank you to everybody who attended. And I can hang out for a couple minutes. But if this is all the time you got, I'll say stay hacking, stay curious, and we'll see you on the next Tradecraft Tuesday.